She's a legend, a whisper in the world's trading pits. A force to be reckoned with. Her name? Mrs. Watanabe. Now, before you picture a little old lady in Osaka with a cat on her lap and a Bloomberg terminal on her coffee table, let's be clear. Mrs. Watanabe isn't one person. She's an icon, a symbol of the millions of Japanese retail investors who punch above their weight in the global financial markets. The term Mrs. Watanabe emerged in the 1990s. Back then, Japan was grappling with the aftermath of its economic bubble. Interest rates plummeted. Japanese housewives, often tasked with managing household finances, started looking for better returns outside of Japan's stagnant markets. They became a force in the world of foreign exchange, earning the nickname Mrs. Watanabe. To understand Mrs. Watanabe, you need to understand Japan. This is a nation with a legendary savings culture. For decades, Japanese households diligently socked away their hard-earned yen. They parked their money in safe but low-yielding assets like postal savings accounts. But then the bubble burst. Interest rates tanked. Suddenly, those safe havens weren't looking so appealing. Mrs. Watanabe, ever resourceful, wasn't content with paltry returns. She realized that to grow her family's nest egg, she had to look beyond Japan's borders. This meant venturing into the unfamiliar waters of foreign currencies, stocks, and bonds. Mrs. Watanabe became famous for her mastery of the carry trade. Here's the simple version. Borrow money in a country with low interest rates, then invest that money in a country with higher interest rates. Pocket the difference. Think of it as financial arbitrage, exploiting the gap between different countries' borrowing costs. With Japan's rock-bottom interest rates, Mrs. Watanabe found fertile ground for the carry trade. She'd borrow yen cheaply, then invest in higher-yielding currencies like the Australian or New Zealand dollar. This strategy, replicated by millions, had a ripple effect on global Forex markets, moving billions of dollars across borders. Section 4. Beyond Forex, a diverse portfolio. While Mrs. Watanabe made her name in Forex, her investment appetite doesn't stop there. She's diversified her portfolio, venturing into global stocks, bonds, and even the wild world of cryptocurrencies. From tech giants in Silicon Valley to mining companies in Australia, Mrs. Watanabe's influence can be felt across asset classes. Her investment decisions are often driven by a combination of factors. There's the search for higher yields, of course, but there's also a growing awareness of global trends and opportunities. Mrs. Watanabe reads the financial news. She does her research. She's not afraid to take calculated risks. Section 5. The changing face of Mrs. Watanabe. The image of Mrs. Watanabe as a middle-aged housewife is outdated. Today, the term encompasses a much broader demographic. Men are just as likely to be engaged in these investment strategies. Younger generations, armed with trading apps and online brokers, are joining the fray. This new generation of investors is tech-savvy. They're comfortable with online platforms and mobile trading. They're quick to adopt new technologies and investment strategies. Think of them as Mrs. Watanabe 2.0, leveraging technology to access global markets with ease. Section 6. David versus Goliath, the little guys fight for returns. The rise of Mrs. Watanabe raises an intriguing question. Can retail investors, even with their collective might, truly compete with institutional giants like hedge funds and pension funds? Do they have the resources, the technology, and the expertise? The answer, like most things in finance, is complex. Institutional investors still hold significant advantages. They have access to sophisticated algorithms, massive amounts of capital, and teams of analysts. But Mrs. Watanabe has a few tricks up her sleeve too. Her collective wisdom, risk appetite, and ability to spot trends should never be underestimated. In the world of finance, never bet against Mrs. Watanabe.